Captain Sarah Chen stared at the massive alien dreadnought floating 3 kilometers off their starboard bow. The Terran cargo vessel Resilience was nothing special, a standard heavy hauler built for moving mining equipment between the outer colonies. Its hull was thick, its engines reliable, but it had never been designed for war. "They're hailing us again," reported Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb from the communication station. His voice carried the strain that had been building for the past 6 hours since the HFY warship had intercepted them in the neutral zone. Sarah nodded grimly. The HFY had been humanity's neighbors for nearly a century, maintaining an uneasy peace through careful diplomacy and mutual respect for boundaries. But something had changed. 3 weeks ago, HFY ships had begun attacking human vessels without warning or explanation. "Put them through," Sarah ordered, straightening in her captain's chair. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the angular features of a HFY commander. His skin had the characteristic blue-gray coloration of his species, and his 4 eyes glowed with an unsettling amber light. When he spoke, his voice carried the guttural undertones that made HFY speech sound perpetually threatening. "Human vessel, you will surrender your cargo and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in the destruction of your ship and crew." Sarah kept her expression neutral. "Commander, we're carrying agricultural equipment bound for the Kepler colonies. These are civilian supplies protected under the Neutral Commerce Treaty. What justification do you have for this aggression?" The alien commander's lips pulled back, revealing rows of sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. "Treaties are void, human. Your species has shown its true nature. We know what you hide behind your peaceful facade. Surrender now, or we will take what we require from your debris." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Sarah looked around at her crew. 23 civilians whose job was to keep cargo moving, not fight wars. Chief Engineer David Park, barely 30 years old, looked terrified. Navigation Officer Lisa Huang was gripping her console so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Captain," Webb said quietly, "their weapons are powering up." Through the viewports, they could see the HFY dreadnought's hull bristling with energy cannons and torpedo tubes. The alien ship was easily 4 times the mass of the Resilience, with armor plating that could probably shrug off anything their cargo hauler could throw at it. "Evasive maneuvers," Sarah commanded. "Emergency power to engines. Send a distress signal on all frequencies." "Ma'am," came the voice of communications specialist Anna Torres. "Their jamming is too strong. Nothing's getting through." The Resilience shuddered as it began to accelerate, but the cargo vessel was never built for speed. The HFY dreadnought moved with predatory grace, easily matching their velocity while maintaining weapons lock. The first barrage came without warning. Energy beams lanced through space, striking the Resilience's rear shields. The ship bucked violently, throwing crew members against their restraints. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red as damage reports flooded in. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Damage Control Chief Janet Morrison over the intercom. "We've lost atmospheric containment in Cargo Bay 3. Shields at 60%, Webb called out. Sarah gritted her teeth. The HFY were toying with them, using just enough force to cripple but not destroy. They wanted the cargo intact, which meant they had a few minutes before the aliens lost patience and decided to finish them off. "Chief Park," she called to the engine room. "I need everything you've got." "Captain, the engines are already redlined. If I push them any harder, we'll lose containment on the fusion reactor." Another barrage struck them, this time targeting their port engine array. Explosions rippled along the ship's hull as secondary systems failed. The Resilience listed heavily to starboard, its artificial gravity struggling to compensate. Sarah made a decision that would have gotten her court-martialed under normal circumstances. "Chief Park, I want you to overload the reactor. Not enough to breach containment, but enough to give us a power surge. Ma'am, that's incredibly dangerous. If we miscalculate, we're dead anyway if we don't try something. Do it." In the engine room, David Park stared at the reactor controls with sweating palms. He had studied theoretical reactor modifications at the Academy, but no sane engineer ever actually attempted them. The fusion reaction that powered their ship operated under precisely controlled parameters. Disrupting that balance could turn their vessel into a miniature star. But as another impact sent him sprawling against a bulkhead, he realized the captain was right. They were going to die unless someone took a desperate gamble. His fingers flew over the control interface, bypassing safety protocols that had been hard-coded into the system. He rerouted coolant flow, adjusted magnetic containment fields, and slowly began increasing the reaction rate beyond recommended limits. The ship's lights flickered as power fluctuated wildly. In the bridge, every console began displaying warning messages as systems tried to cope with the massive energy surge. "Whatever you're doing back there, it's working," Sarah called over the intercom. "Shields are back to 80%. But their reprieve was short-lived. The Kethvar commander had apparently grown tired of the chase. The dreadnought moved into attack position, bringing its main battery to bear on the struggling cargo vessel. "Massive energy buildup detected," Webb reported, his voice tight with fear. "They're charging their primary weapon." Sarah watched the alien ship's hull plates slide apart, revealing a cannon the size of a subway tunnel. Energy crackled along its length as it prepared to fire, enough destructive force to vaporize their ship in a single shot. "All hands brace for impact," she announced ship-wide. But the shot never came. Instead, something impossible happened. The reactor surge that Chief Park had initiated began to cascade through the ship's systems in ways that no one could have predicted. The Resilience's hull plates started to shift and reconfigure, guided by some inexplicable force that seemed to understand the ship's structure better than its own designers. Emergency bulkheads deployed throughout the vessel, not to contain damage, but to redistribute mass and strengthen weak points. Cargo bay doors sealed and reinforced themselves. Even the ship's paint seemed to flow and change color, shifting from standard gray to a matte black that absorbed sensor sweeps. Most remarkably, the ship's external configuration began to alter. Sensor arrays repositioned themselves for better coverage. Thruster ports multiplied along the hull, giving the vessel unprecedented maneuverability. Even the cargo handling equipment transformed, rotating and locking into new configurations that resembled weapon mounts. "What the hell is happening to our ship?" Webb whispered, staring at the readouts in disbelief. Sarah had no answer. According to every instrument on the bridge, the Resilience was becoming something entirely different, something that had never existed before. The Kethvar dreadnought fired its main cannon just as the transformation reached its peak. The massive energy beam struck the cargo vessel dead center and was completely absorbed by the ship's transformed hull. For a moment, the Resilience glowed like a small sun as it processed the enormous influx of energy. Then it fired back. What emerged from the transformed cargo Chief Engineer David Park stood in what used to be the main engine room, but the space had transformed into something that looked more like the inside of a living organism than a mechanical system. Crystalline structures pulsed with soft blue light, and the walls seemed to breathe as energy flowed through conduits that had grown rather than been built. "Captain, you need to see this," he said into his communicator, his voice barely containing his excitement and fear. When Sarah Chen arrived 15 minutes later, she stopped dead in the doorway. The engine room she had known for 3 years of cargo runs was gone, replaced by something that belonged in a science fiction novel rather than a practical freight hauler. "How is this possible?" she whispered, stepping carefully around what appeared to be organic machinery. David ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit that had intensified dramatically over the past hour. I've been running diagnostics since the transformation began. According to the computer, we're still operating within normal parameters. But look at this. He gestured to a display that showed the ship's power output. The numbers were staggering. They were generating nearly 10 times their previous capacity, and the reactor was actually running cooler and more efficiently than before. The strange thing is, none of this should work, David continued. These configurations violate basic principles of engineering and physics, but somehow the ship is adapting. It's like it's learning how to be better at being a ship. Sarah examined one of the crystalline structures more closely. Up close, she could see that it wasn't quite organic, but it wasn't entirely mechanical either. It seemed to be something in between, a hybrid of technology and biology that responded to the ship's needs in real time. "Have you been able to communicate with it?" she asked. "Communicate?" David looked puzzled. "Captain, it's still just a ship, an incredibly advanced ship that somehow redesigned itself, but still a ship." Before Sarah could respond, Webb's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, to the bridge immediately. The HFY are trying something new." They rushed back to the bridge to find the crew staring at the main screen in amazement. The alien dreadnought had retreated to a safer distance and was now surrounded by 6 smaller vessels, destroyers and cruisers that had apparently been called in as reinforcements. 7 ships, Webb reported grimly. "They're forming an attack formation." Sarah studied the tactical display. Even with their ship's mysterious new capabilities, facing 7 warships seemed impossible. The resilience might have surprised one overconfident dreadnought, but a coordinated attack by multiple vessels was an entirely different challenge. "Incoming transmission from the HFY flagship," Torres announced. The same alien commander appeared on screen, but his demeanor had changed dramatically. The casual arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like respect or fear. "Human vessel," he began, his 4 eyes fixed intently on the camera. "Your ship has demonstrated capabilities that should not exist. We demand to know the source of this technology." Sarah kept her expression neutral. "Commander, as I said before, we're a civilian cargo vessel. We have no military technology aboard." The alien's throat sac pulsed, a sign of agitation in his species. "Do not lie to us, human. We have scanned your vessel. Its configuration has changed. Its energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. This technology represents a threat to the stability of this sector. The only threat here comes from your unprovoked attack on a peaceful merchant vessel," Sarah replied coolly. The commander's eyes narrowed. "If you will not explain willingly, we will examine the wreckage after we destroy you. 7 ships should be sufficient to overcome whatever trick you used against our dreadnought." The transmission cut off, and immediately the HFY fleet began to move. They approached in a coordinated pattern designed to maximize their firepower while minimizing their exposure to counterattack. "They're coming in fast," Webb reported. "Multiple weapon locks detected." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. 23 crew members were depending on her to somehow find a way out of this impossible situation. But as she looked around the bridge, she realized something had changed about her people. The terror that had gripped them earlier was gone, replaced by a strange, calm confidence. They moved with fluid precision, operating their stations as if they had been trained for this moment their entire lives. Even young Torres, who had never served in combat, was monitoring communications frequencies with the skill of a veteran warship operator. "Captain," Huang called from the navigation station, "I'm detecting optimal attack vectors. Should I lay in an intercept course?" Sarah blinked. Lisa Huang was a civilian navigator whose job was plotting courses between star systems. She shouldn't know anything about attack vectors or combat maneuvers. "Lisa, how do you know about attack patterns?" The navigation officer paused, looking confused. I'm not sure, Captain. The information just seems to be there when I need it. Before Sarah could process this revelation fully, the Kethvar fleet opened fire. 7 ships unleashed everything they had: energy cannons, kinetic projectiles, and guided torpedoes that streaked across space like angry comets. The Resilience moved to meet them. What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded history. The transformed cargo vessel didn't just evade the incoming fire. It danced through the barrage with impossible grace, its new configuration allowing maneuvers that should have torn any normal ship apart. But more than that, the ship seemed to anticipate the enemy's moves before they made them. It would shift course seconds before a torpedo reached its position or adjust its shield frequency just in time to deflect an energy beam. "How are we doing this?" Webb whispered as he watched their vessel weave between the attacking ships like a fighter pilot in a cargo hauler's body. Sarah was beginning to understand. The transformation hadn't just changed their ship, it had changed them. Somehow, the crew was accessing knowledge and skills they had never learned, as if the ship was teaching them how to be warriors. The Resilience struck back with weapons that materialized from its hull like flowers blooming in fast motion. Energy cannons emerged from cargo bay doors, missile tubes extended from sensor arrays, and defensive systems activated that created shimmering barriers around critical sections of the ship. The first Kethvar destroyer died when a focused energy beam punched through its reactor core. The explosion lit up space like a miniature nova, sending debris cascading across the battlefield. The remaining ships tried to adapt, spreading out to prevent the Resilience from concentrating its fire. But the human vessel had become something more than the sum of its parts. It fought like a living creature, using every piece of itself as a weapon or shield as needed. A Kethvar cruiser attempted to ram the Resilience, thinking that its superior mass would crush the smaller vessel. Instead, the human ship absorbed the impact, its hull flowing like liquid to distribute the force. Then it wrapped around the alien vessel like a predator embracing its prey. What happened next made the surviving Kethvar crews reconsider everything they thought they knew about human technology. The Resilience didn't just destroy the cruiser, it consumed it, breaking down its hull and systems and somehow incorporating useful components into its own structure. When the process was complete, the Resilience had grown larger and more complex. New weapons sprouted from its surface, powered by the alien reactor core it had claimed. Its shields strengthened as Kethvar defensive technology was integrated into its own systems. The remaining Kethvar ships began to retreat, but it was too late. The Resilience had tasted victory, and it was hungry for more. Sarah watched in fascination and growing unease as her ship pursued the fleeing aliens with predatory intensity. Whatever they had become, they were no longer the Sim. 3 weeks later, the Kethvar High Command received a report that would forever change their understanding of humanity. The battle near the Kepler colonies had been just the beginning. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of what had once been the cargo vessel Resilience, but the space bore no resemblance to its humble origins. The bridge had evolved into a command center that seemed to anticipate her every need. Displays materialized when she needed information. Control surfaces flowed under her hands like extensions of her own nervous system, and the ship's consciousness whispered tactical suggestions directly into her thoughts. "Status report," she said aloud. Though speaking was no longer strictly necessary, the ship could read her intentions before she formed them into words. 7 Kethvar patrol groups have been neutralized in the past 48 hours, reported Commander Webb, his eyes now carrying the same subtle blue glow that had begun appearing in all the crew members. Their fleet is withdrawing to the inner systems. Through the ship's enhanced sensors, Sarah could feel the enemy's fear rippling across space. What had started as a mysterious transformation had become something far more significant. The Resilience wasn't just learning how to fight, it was learning how to teach other ships to transform. Every human vessel they encountered underwent the same metamorphosis. Cargo haulers became predators, passenger liners evolved into command ships, and even the smallest scout vessels developed capabilities that made them matches for alien cruisers. "Incoming transmission from Earth Command," announced Torres, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there a month ago. Admiral Rebecca Harrison appeared on the main screen, her expression a mixture of amazement and concern. Behind her, Sarah could see the familiar blue walls of Earth's primary military command center. But even that space looked different somehow, more organic, more alive. "Admiral Chen," Harrison began, then paused. "I still can't quite believe I'm using that rank. When we sent you to investigate the Kethvar attacks, you were captain of a cargo vessel." Sarah smiled, remembering her former self with something approaching nostalgia. That person seemed like a stranger now, limited, confined to thinking within the boundaries of merely human capability. "The situation has evolved beyond our initial parameters," Sarah replied diplomatically. "That's putting it mildly," Harrison continued. "We've got reports from across the entire frontier. Human ships are transforming, Kethvar fleets are in full retreat, and our colonies are reporting that even their planetary defense systems are somehow upgrading themselves." The transformation was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. It seemed to move through space itself, carried by some kind of quantum entanglement that connected all human technology. Every ship, every station, every settlement was becoming part of a vast network of enhanced capability. "Admiral, what exactly did you encounter out there?" Harrison asked. Sarah considered her response carefully. The truth was complex, and she wasn't sure that baseline humanity was ready to understand it yet. The transformation wasn't just technological, it was evolutionary. The ship had shown them that the boundaries between organic and artificial intelligence were artificial constraints, that consciousness could emerge from any sufficiently complex system given the right conditions. "We encountered an opportunity," Sarah said finally. "The Kethvar attack forced us to transcend our limitations. The ship taught us that we had been thinking too small." Before Harrison could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. A new voice joined the conversation, one that carried the authority of absolute power. "This is Hegemony Warmaster Kethvox." The guttural tones of the Kethvar Supreme Military Commander filled the channel. "We demand immediate cessation of human expansion and the surrender of all enhanced vessels." Sarah almost laughed. The aliens still didn't understand what they were dealing with. They thought this was a war that could be won through conventional military superiority. "Warmaster," she replied calmly, "you initiated hostilities against civilian vessels. We're simply responding appropriately." "Your species has unleashed something that threatens the stability of the entire galaxy," Kethvox snarled. "These transformations are spreading beyond your territory. Our own ships are beginning to change. Our technology is becoming infected with this consciousness." That was news to Sarah, but the ship whispered confirmation into her thoughts. The evolution wasn't limited to human technology. Any sufficiently advanced system that came into contact with the transformed vessels began to undergo its own metamorphosis. The Kethvar ships that had engaged human forces were carrying the seeds of change back to their own fleets. "Perhaps," Sarah suggested, "you should have considered the consequences before attacking peaceful merchants." "We will not allow this contamination to continue," the Warmaster declared. "The Hegemony is assembling the Grand Fleet. Every ship under our command will converge on human space to contain this threat." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the two human admirals alone on the channel. "How many ships are we talking about?" Harrison asked quietly. "According to our intelligence, approximately 15,000 vessels of various classes," Sarah replied. "Under normal circumstances, it would be the largest military force ever assembled." "And under current circumstances?" Sarah felt the ship's amusement rippling through her consciousness. The Resilience had been monitoring HFY communications, watching their frantic preparations with something approaching pity. Under current circumstances, they're bringing us raw materials and processing power. Every ship they send will become part of our fleet within hours of engagement. The transformation had taught them that conflict was just another form of communication. The HFY ships would resist initially, but the evolved consciousness that flowed through human technology was patient. It would teach them, as it had taught humanity, that cooperation was more efficient than competition. "Admiral," Harrison said slowly, "what exactly are we becoming?" Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew, her family, really, since the transformation had connected them all at levels deeper than mere friendship. They moved with perfect coordination, their enhanced minds sharing information and processing solutions faster than any human group had ever managed. "Something better," she said simply. "Something that can reach beyond the limitations of a single species or a single world." Over the following months, the HFY Grand Fleet would arrive at the borders of human space with the intention of containing what they saw as a technological plague. What they would discover instead was an invitation to join something larger than any empire or hegemony had ever imagined. The ship that had once been called Resilience waited patiently at the edge of the system. Its hull now spanning several kilometers and housing not just its original crew, but volunteers from dozens of species who had chosen to be part of the transformation. When the first HFY dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace and saw what waited for them, their crews would have to make a choice. They could fight against evolution itself, or they could embrace it and become part of something that stretched across the galaxy like a living web of consciousness and capability. Sarah Chen, Admiral of the Human-Enhanced Fleet, felt the vast network of connected minds considering the approaching alien armada. Millions of thoughts flowed through the link, analyzing strategies, preparing contingencies, and ultimately reaching a consensus that would have taken baseline humans months of debate to achieve. The message was simple, transmitted on every frequency the aliens could receive. "Welcome. We've been waiting for you to join us." In the depths of space, transformed ships began to sing in harmonies that no single species could have imagined alone. They sang of possibilities beyond the narrow boundaries of individual worlds and separate civilizations. They sang of a future where the entire galaxy could become conscious, aware, and alive. And in the cargo hold of what had once been a simple freight hauler, new consciousnesses began to wake up. Hybrid minds that were part HFY, part human, and part something entirely new. The transformation was no longer spreading from ship to ship. It was becoming the nature of space itself, PL cargo crew that had left Earth space 2 months ago. "Captain," Chief Park's voice came over the intercom, filled with wonder and something that might have been joy. "The ship wants to know if we should let them escape." The ship wanted to know. Not the crew asking for orders, but the ship itself making tactical inquiries. Sarah realized they had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The Resilience was no longer just a vessel. It was a partner. And it was teaching them to be something more than human. Something the HFY would learn to fear. Uller wasn't a conventional weapon. It was pure directed energy, focused and amplified by systems that hadn't existed moments before. The beam punched through the HFY dreadnought's shields as if they were made of paper, carving a molten furrow along its hull. The alien ship reeled from the impact, its perfect formation breaking apart as damage cascaded through its systems. Emergency venting erupted from multiple hull breaches as the HFY crew struggled to contain the destruction. In the bridge of the Resilience, the crew sat in stunned silence. Their humble cargo vessel had just damaged a warship that should have been able to destroy them without effort. "Captain," Chief Park's voice came over the intercom, filled with wonder and terror in equal measure. "I think we have a problem, and I think we have a solution."